Before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to our Instagram account. We've just started taking Instagram more seriously and posting exclusive content over there, as well as using it to let you know when new videos come out. So to stay up to date, follow us on Instagram. It's TLDR News UK. As much as you might love or hate Theresa May, I think we can all agree that she's not in an enviable position. She's been trying to reach a deal with the EU for months, and even now she's got a deal, it's been panned by politicians and the public alike. Many members of her own party don't even like it. So now all she can do is try and force the deal through the House of Commons and hope it succeeds. As we discussed in another video, getting the deal through the House of Commons could be a challenge. She needs 320 MPs to support her deal for it to get through the House and progress to the next stage. This could prove difficult for May. May has around 240 Conservative MPs whose support she can rely on. In contrast, we can be pretty certain that around 20 Tories will vote against their leader. You then have the vast majority of Labour MPs who will vote against May, with a few rebels on her side. Then the smaller parties will very likely vote against May. This leaves May short of the 320 votes she needs. It's possible that she can scrape together a majority if she can pull together the pro-Brexit and pro-Remain sides of her party, along with creating a deal which keeps the Scots and the DUP happy, and potentially even pulling across some Labour MPs from pro-Brexit constituencies. Because of this challenge, many doubt that May will be able to pull it off. After all, many of the votes she'd rely on from her own party and her supply and confidence partners, the DUP, aren't on her side. The DUP have said that there's basically no way they'll accept May's deal, and the pro-Brexit ERG Conservatives are calling for May to step down, so it's safe to say they're not the biggest fans of her deal either. So let's assume that May will fail to persuade MPs to support her deal and it won't make it through Parliament. Well, May's government has made it clear that there won't be another deal, with Downing Street saying that it's a choice between the PM's deal or no Brexit at all. May seems remarkably confident the situation will be resolved, commenting, "I'm sure that the British Parliament will want to deliver on the views of the British people and respect the democratic decision that they've taken." So May's government finds itself in a bit of a predicament. They have a deal which is unlikely to pass through the House of Commons, they don't have time to renegotiate a new deal, and most of them aren't happy to do nothing and just watch the UK crash out of the EU with no deal at all. So what can happen next? Well, May's job is certainly at risk. A number of Conservative MPs are unhappy with how their leader, Theresa May, has been running the negotiation process. As such, they're calling for their fellow Conservative MPs to submit letters of no confidence in her leadership, to trigger a leadership battle within the party. If 15% of Conservative MPs send letters of no confidence to the chairman of the 1922 committee, Graham Brady, then a vote of no confidence will take place. 15% of Conservative MPs is 48 members, so that's the number of letters that will be needed for a vote to be held. While some ERG MPs such as Jacob Rees-Mogg are known to have submitted letters, no one besides Brady knows exactly how many letters have been written thus far. If the 48 letter threshold is reached, then all of the Conservative MPs will be asked to vote on whether they support the Prime Minister or not. If she wins, then she continues to run the Conservative Party and her leadership can't be challenged for another year. If she loses the vote, then she'll be forced to resign and a leadership contest would begin. Those supporting the motion of no confidence are hoping that by putting someone else at the helm, the Brexit process will go in a direction more in keeping with their goals. The question is, are there enough Conservative MPs who actually support this move? And do they have anyone who could actually become Prime Minister and deliver the deal that they're calling for? We're considering making a video to discuss who May's successor could be. If you'd be interested in that, drop this video a like and let us know in the comments. And it's not just May who could find her job in jeopardy, as many people in the Labour Party are calling for another general election to be held. That might not surprise you. Of course the opposition are looking for a general election. The Conservatives are infighting more than ever before, their leader looks weak, and their proposed Brexit solution is unpopular with politicians and the public alike. Frankly, Labour fancies their chances in a general election, and they're hoping that they'll have the control over Brexit and that they'll be able to handle it better than the Conservatives are. Whether you think that Labour will do a good job of Brexit probably depends on your party allegiances and your feelings about the Brexit process. But regardless of your thoughts, changing leadership now could be very poor timing. General election campaigns tend to take months and require the focus of party leaders and MPs. Therefore, an election would be a major distraction from the Brexit process and could result in negotiations being put on hold altogether. The hope is that the upheaval would be worth it, and that a change in government would end the Brexit impasse. But that's a big gamble to take. The other issue with holding a general election is that it would require the sign-off of the House of Commons. Since 2011, the Fixed Term Parliaments Act has meant that the Prime Minister is no longer allowed to call a general election whenever they wish. Now elections happen every 5 years, meaning the next election should happen in 2022. The only way to force an election to happen sooner is by getting 2/3 of MPs to support the decision. For this 2/3 majority to be achieved, the move would need to achieve cross-party support. May would need to convince her own parties to vote alongside Labour for an election to take place. It's possible that May might want to hold an election in the hopes of collecting more votes and gaining greater control over the House of Commons. But considering how well that tactic went for her back in 2017, it's unlikely that May will want to pull this card again. One benefit of a general election is that it gives the public a chance to have their say. They can choose between the Prime Minister and her Brexit plans, or Labour and their generally more Remainer approach. However, a simpler way for the public to voice their opinion is through a second referendum. The idea of a second referendum, or people's vote, has been gaining steam throughout the year. When it was first proposed, it was laughed off by many, but support for a second referendum has been increasing in recent months, with the Lib Dems, Green Party, and even some Conservatives supporting the plan. You might expect Labour to be behind the plans, but leader Jeremy Corbyn hasn't actually commented much on the idea. Although the smaller parties might be passionate about the plan, without the backing of a larger group such as Labour, it seems unlikely that the public will be allowed a second vote. That being said, if May's deal fails in the House, support for a second referendum could grow. If May's deal isn't successful, then the UK is essentially left with two options: no deal or remain in the EU. Both decisions would be hugely controversial, so some MPs might be willing to back a second referendum in order to push the onus to decide back to the people. The idea of a second referendum faces another, possibly even bigger challenge: time. With only 18 weeks to go, there isn't a whole lot of time for a referendum to be planned, legislated, campaigned on, and held. In fact, UK law requires that a referendum take at least 10 weeks. That's in addition to the time it takes to legislate the referendum before the official campaign begins. Looking at recent referendums, it's clear to see that time isn't on our side for this one. It seems that the common issue is a lack of time. May can't reach a good enough deal because she doesn't have enough time. An election would be difficult because we don't have enough time. A second referendum would also be difficult because we don't have enough time. That March 29th deadline seems to be the root cause of a number of Brexit-related problems. It doesn't have to be that way though, as the time frame can be extended. Sound too good to be true? Well, it kind of is. For an extension to be granted, all 27 EU nations need to agree to it, which isn't likely. Also, extending the negotiation period wouldn't be popular back in the UK. Many of those who voted to leave are already getting impatient with how long the process is taking. Extending that further could be very unpopular. Although very different approaches, the idea of getting rid of May, holding a general election, holding a second referendum, or extending the transition period are all trying to solve the same core problem. They're trying to shake things up so that the UK can have a shot at reaching a better deal. But what if these strategies don't succeed? Well, the UK could default into leaving the EU without a deal at all. Leaving without a deal is actually the easiest option. If the government simply sits back and does nothing, the UK will automatically leave the EU on the 29th of March 2019 when the negotiation period comes to an end. At this point, the UK will have left and no longer have any agreements or trade deals with the EU. There are some people who support the idea of a no-deal Brexit, but they are in the minority. Even the UK's Brexit committee says that leaving with no deal would be unsatisfactory and potentially damaging for both sides. That's because leaving without a deal would mean a sudden, huge change to how the UK operates and how its relationship with the EU functions. This situation is often called a cliff edge Brexit, as overnight the UK would go from being an EU member to having no formal relationship with the EU at all. This would leave EU and UK migrants in the balance, as well as creating an uncertain legal and trade environment for businesses. Some are in favour of this option. They often argue that Britain voted to leave the EU, so the UK should cut ties with the Union and not capitulate to any of their demands in order to get a good deal. These people see a no deal as the best way for the UK to completely end their relationship with the EU. While this channel tries to allow people to have their own opinions and believe whatever they want, I'm comfortable saying that the majority of experts agree that a no-deal Brexit probably isn't the best idea. Without getting too project fear for you, a sudden change like this could be very bad news for citizens and businesses alike, leaving the UK in a very unstable economic and political situation. If the Commons isn't happy to accept May's deal, and also isn't willing to cope with the consequences of leaving without any deal at all, they could choose to not leave the EU. This is an incredibly controversial option, and would likely cause chaos in the UK. Choosing to ignore the referendum result and remain in the EU would be seen by many as hugely undemocratic and a betrayal of the people. It is legally possible though. After all, the original referendum was only an advisory vote, but that doesn't mean that many MPs will be willing to face the public's wrath after cancelling Brexit. The other issue with withdrawing the UK's Article 50 declaration and just staying in the EU is that it might not actually be allowed. We discussed in our video, Can the UK Undo Brexit?, that it's not entirely clear under EU law if the UK would be allowed to simply stay in the EU after enacting Article 50. One of the authors of Article 50 says that the UK could withdraw it at any time, but not everyone agrees. Anyway, if you want to learn more about that, check out our video on the topic. But for now, let's just say that ignoring the referendum and staying in the EU would be a politically and legally questionable move. So the stakes are high if the deal isn't agreed by Parliament. May could be forced to resign, there could be a general election or a second referendum, the UK could leave without a deal, or they could opt to just forget the whole thing. For more updates on Brexit as it develops, subscribe to TLDR News. Also, make sure to follow us on Instagram for exclusive content and to be notified when videos come out.